There was a huge urgency on the part of the people in New York City and the part of the owners of the Deutsche Bank building. They wanted to get this episode behind them and get on with their lives.
That probably, brought a lot of attention that we didn't want upon us. Maybe the community and some agencies weren't very satisfied with the pace of our investigation.
Because at that point, it was a rush. Let's clean it up. On the other hand, we were faced with the problem of having to do a credible scientific study. Those two created a lot of tension. The community wanted to get out, get done, get over. But they didn't want to be exposed to any dust, any hazardous materials that were regenerated. They'd had this dose once. They didn't want to do it again. But because of what we'd found in our initial survey, we realized that what the consultants and what people were recommending, what the regulations required that existed at that time, was totally inadequate working, because the dust had been transformed. Asbestos that had been applied as an insulation product, pretty long, coarse material, had been pulverized into extremely fine and extremely long and extremely toxic particles. The materials were ground and pulverized in a manner that would allow them to become airborne far easier than any other material we'd ever seen. That was the most frightening, I call it cocktail of environmental contaminants anybody had ever seen. We basically told our client that we're going to have to use methods that people have not used in this, because this situation's never been there before. We cannot let these people go in unless they're adequately protected.
It was so emotionally charged. We had to take a hard stance, and when they're trying to find closure, they're trying to still find remains of having a little bit of conflict with the heroes of 9/11 and the community that wants progress being, they want progress. They want to see things happening. And we didn't make too many friends. But as soon as we were able to start sharing our results, that very quickly changed.
We were meeting with the firefighters, or we were meeting with EPA representatives so that they could get information and so that they could help us formulate a plan. I mean, eventually, once we started working with them as a team, putting together protocols, looking for their input and acceptance, that's when it really hit that we were making a difference.
We took it upon ourselves as part of our support for the customer to say, here are the requirements, and then the agencies got behind us, and that became the standard for people working in the buildings from then on.
Not only was it an enormous project of scale and scope, with all different types of experts and contractors, you had this emotional weight on it too, and then you had just the high profile of it, the attention that we got from all different angles.
This disaster had many kinds of consequences, not the least of which was the fact there was a tremendous loss of property. The costs were enormous. The costs in the building that we were involved in was $1 billion. The costs in the World Towers were several $billion. Those costs were likely to break an insurance company or break a company if they had to pay for it. In the midst of all this disaster, the human tragedy, there's a corporate pressure. The EPA and the trades, the people that were working for the building trades, all these different agencies wanted to be sure this was done right.
Can these materials be cleaned? Can you reuse electronic components, or can you clean them to a suitable level? Is it economically feasible to clean things to a certain level?
Nobody went out in this building beforehand and said there's going to be a disaster. You're going to get the planes flying in, and then say, okay, now I got to clean it up. The policy, insurance policies all say, well, you have to restore it to prior condition. Well, nobody knew what prior condition was, not scientifically. Everybody knew you walked into that building, it was beautiful.
We did the best job that we could to thoroughly document it, and really what it came down to was just sometimes it wasn't economically viable to clean or perform certain acts. So that would typically remove to a disposal or ultimately maybe a deconstruction of a structure.
There's this much World Trade Center dust, and it's this kind of risk, and therefore you have to clean it to this level. And if you can't afford to do that, you have to bring the building down. Ultimately, the building had to come down.